So I feel like Marnie and I have been on a bit of an emotional roller coaster when it comes to sleep. She has been probably, I would say, the most difficult of all 4 of my children when it comes to sleep, although my first was pretty tough, but I kind of put a lot of that down to him being my first baby, not really knowing what I was doing. I didn't expect to be back in that situation 10 years later with baby number 4, so it's definitely been a challenge. She has tested me and moved the goalposts more times than I care to remember, and I don't feel like I've chatted about it on here for a while. I feel like we've kind of turned a bit of a corner, but not necessarily in the direction that I wanted to go in. I thought it might be an interesting conversation to have for those of you going through a similar situation, or those of you who can relate and have toddlers who have similar feelings towards sleep and naps and that kind of thing. So I'll go first. I will tell you what's been going on here with Marnie and sleep, the whole story right from the beginning, and then I would love you to go next. Tell me what your sleep situation is with your little ones, whether you're out the other side and everything's fine now and you found something that works for you, whether you're right in the middle of it and really struggling, or just want to share or chat, get something off your chest. I want to start a conversation with you guys about toddlers or babies or even preschoolers and older and sleep. So let's chat about it. I will start. So right from the very beginning, Marnie has been difficult with sleep. I knew very early on that things weren't going to be easy with her. I don't know why, I just had this feeling that she was going to be more challenging than her big brother and sister, Merrin and Aiden. So my eldest is Dylan. If you're new to my channel, I have 4 children and they range in age from 13 to 2. Marnie is 2, and my eldest Dylan, who's now 13, was quite challenging when it came to sleep, as I said earlier. My middle 2, Merrin, who is 12, and Aiden, who is 6, were a dream with sleep, pretty much. I mean, they had their ups and downs like all kids do, but as a general rule, they were brilliant. They would go off to sleep on their own in the evening. I didn't have to lie with them for hours on end like I had to with Dylan and with Marnie. They napped until they were well past their 3rd birthday and for lengthy periods of time during the day. They used to come into bed with us in the middle of the night, but then all 4 of them have, and I don't have a problem with that. That's absolutely fine. So they've all done that, but my middle 2 would sleep till a decent time in the morning. Just, they were brilliant when it came to sleep. So I just thought that Dylan was tricky. We'd done things wrong. We hadn't helped him to become a good sleeper because he was our first, and that's what led to those problems. So I was completely stumped when Marnie came along, and I felt like we'd gone back to square one. So how did I know that she was going to be a bad sleeper? Like I said earlier, I just had a feeling. I would put her down in the cot. We had like one of those bedside cots that attaches to your bed. I would put her in there, and I could just tell she wasn't a sound sleeper. She would move around a lot, she would look for me, she'd be more alert, and didn't seem to go into that really deep sleep that my middle 2 had. They would go out like a light, and I knew that nothing would wake them up, and I just had a sense that it wasn't the case with Marnie, and I was right. No matter where I was, whether I went downstairs and she was in a completely quiet room, or I left white noise on for her, or there was background noise, or I was lying next to her in bed, she just didn't seem to sleep soundly. She would also take forever to settle and to go to sleep in the first place. I'd have to lie with her for what felt like hours, stroking her head or feeding her as I was at the time. She seemed to always need me with her to settle her off to sleep. Now perhaps that's where I made my first mistake, and I could have done things differently to train her to comfort and soothe and get herself off to sleep. So potentially that is where I made my biggest mistake. So very early on, I would stay with her until she fell asleep. I would go to her if she woke up, and all of those things that you deep down probably know you shouldn't do. So fast forward a year or so, and I now had a baby who would sleep in our bed for the majority of the night, and that wasn't a big problem in itself. It was more the fact that she was still waking frequently and looking for me. I was still breastfeeding her until she was around just after 2, I would say. So she would wake up and look for me in that sense, and that comfort would get her back to sleep. She never really accepted sleeping in her cot. I can probably count on 2 hands how many times she actually slept for any length of time in what became her cot. Once she grew out of the one that attached to our bed and moved into a bigger cot, she just never took to it. She hated it. She wouldn't settle in it. If she woke up and realized that she was in it, she would get so upset that it was impossible to settle her back down. So I would always end up taking her into our bed, and that's how that cycle began. So this went on for a long time until we decided, right, she's just not going to sleep in the cot. We can't have her sleep in our bed from bedtime until morning forever. So we need to try and do something about it. So we decided to move her into her own proper big girl's bed. And I was very dubious about it. I thought it could go either way, but actually it worked out for us quite well. What worked well about it is that I could lie next to her in bed as I would in our own bed to get her off to sleep. So I would lie down next to her in the single bed. It's a proper single bed, not a toddler bed. So there's plenty of room for me to lie next to her. It's quite low to the floor, so I wasn't worried about her falling out and things. So I would lie down in bed next to her, read her stories, give her a cuddle until she went to sleep. Then I would creep out the room and she would stay sleeping in her bed for a good 6-7 hours, sometimes longer, and then she would come in with us, and that would be around maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. That's fine, I'm used to that, they've all done that, so that's not a problem. So I felt like we had made real progress. She was still napping in the day for roughly an hour to an hour and a half, so I felt like we'd really turned a corner. I was fine with her coming into our bed in the middle of the night. I didn't see a real problem with that. She was going off to sleep fine in the evening. She was staying there for a decent length of time. She was happy sleeping in her bed, not in a cot and not in our bed. Great, I thought we had it nailed. Then she decided, and this was around Christmas time, that she wasn't going to go to sleep in her bed for what felt like an eternity. I would lie there with her sometimes for an hour and a half, sometimes even longer, and she just would not go to sleep. She would not necessarily get out of bed, but she'd be standing up on her bed, passing me stories to read, singing me songs, just chatting away in general and not settling, which hadn't been the case before. So this opened up a whole new problem that I didn't know how to solve, because with a cot, you can obviously leave them in their cot, leave the room, tell them it's nighttime, time for sleep, and then you know they can't go anywhere. But Marnie, being in this bed, now she realised, actually, I don't have to stay here. I can get up and I can go and see mummy and find out where she is, what she's doing. I can go and play with my brothers and sister. I can go and get my toys. This is great. So this opened up a whole new world of problems with Marnie getting out of bed. When we did finally get her back into bed, it would only last for a minute or two and then she'd be up again. And it was just back and forth for the best part of our evening. And I just felt like the daytimes were a struggle. I'd have to drive around in the car to get her off to sleep, and then my evenings were just being dominated by the process of getting Marnie to sleep. So I couldn't spend time with the other three. She wouldn't accept my husband lying down with her and getting her off to sleep. It had to be me. It was just becoming a bit silly. So I made the decision to try dropping her nap. Now this was not something I wanted to do. I feel like, and I still, to be honest, feel like she needs a nap. I need her to have a nap in the day to get things done. I feel like that is my time to do work, but it just got to the point where I felt like something had to give, and the nap was it. Now, since we dropped the nap, which was probably 5 or 6 weeks ago, bedtime has been so much smoother. She is exhausted, as you can imagine, by bedtime. So by 6:30, 7 o'clock at the latest, I get her into bed, read stories, and we start that routine, which 9 times out of 10 works like a charm, and she's fast asleep by 7:30. Brilliant. And she stays there until, again, about 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe slightly earlier, at which point she comes in with me and Dan. That's fine, but the only problem with it is that mid-afternoon school pickup time can be a risky business, because by that point she's exhausted. So if I need to go anywhere in the car, there's a danger she might fall asleep. She can become a little bit unreasonable at that sort of time of day and just before tea time. And she is a child that likes a moan, so she will let you know if she's grumpy, and it can be quite a testing couple of hours. That seems to be getting better though, thankfully. I think the longer time goes on, she seems to be able to stay awake until bedtime without too much trouble. There is the odd day where it is more difficult than others, but for the most part, she's okay now. So I think we might have turned a corner when it comes to dropping the nap and adjusting to that new sleep pattern. So I think even though I do miss nap times, and the reason I'm filming this today is because I posted about it on Instagram yesterday, and a few people commented to say dreading losing nap time and that their kids were a lot older than mine and still napping, and it's not something I wanted to do, but I think for Marnie it was probably the right decision. However, there is still a part of me, like I said earlier, that feels like she is permanently overtired. I feel like since she was a tiny baby, she's always been overtired because she fights her sleep and because she wakes up so frequently. I feel like she's never fully rested. I feel like she could always do with a little bit more sleep, and perhaps that's the root of the problem. I don't think we can go backwards now. I don't think we can go back to naps, sadly, as much as I might like to, although things could change all over again when she starts nursery and school. Obviously that's going to tire her out a lot more, but that is my sleep story so far and where we are currently with Marnie. So we've dropped the nap. She's now, just for reference, she's 3 in June, so she's just over 2.5. She is definitely the earliest of my 4 to drop her daytime nap, but it seems to have worked out for us in a roundabout kind of way. So I want to hear from you now. What is your sleep situation with your toddler, or when you had a toddler? What age did they drop their nap? Did you have a similar situation to me with a reluctant sleeper? If you did, please let me know in the comments so I know I'm not entirely alone. Or like me, did you have a 3rd or 4th baby who's suddenly not a great sleeper compared to your 1st or 2nd who did sleep well? I would love to know. Let me know in the comments. And if you've got this sleep thing nailed and you want to share how you did it, then again, let us know in the comments. I'm sure everyone would love to read them. I know I would. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm aware it's a bit of a ramble, but hopefully it's been helpful and interesting for you to listen to. And if you're not a subscriber of mine already, I'd love to have you stick around on this channel. I will be sharing regular mum chats and rambles like this over here, so do click the subscribe button and I will see you in my next one. Bye.